Ambassador Kellen stood at the threshold of his ship's landing ramp, his tall frame silhouetted against the Earth's atmosphere. His large, soft blue eyes blinked as he surveyed the alien landscape ahead. Earth, the planet of legend and myth, a world spoken of only in cautious whispers in the galactic halls of diplomacy. It was said to be as treacherous as it was beautiful. Kellen's species, the Rindar, were known for their adaptability to various planetary conditions, but the reports on Earth's atmosphere had been particularly intriguing. The data indicated an unusual composition that was both benign and potent in ways they did not fully understand. Now, standing on the cusp of first contact, Kellen felt a combination of curiosity and unease. The Rindar were known for their meticulous planning and cautious diplomacy. Despite their superior technology, they never entered a new world without extensive observation. However, nothing could have prepared them for what they were about to experience. Kellen was accompanied by two key figures, Commander Jera, a high-ranking officer of the Sarnak species, and Unit 9A, a synthetic intelligence being from the Mecron race. Jera, a being from a warrior race, was stoic and disciplined, standing at least 2 heads taller than Kellen. Her dark, obsidian-like skin shimmered in the Earth's light, and her 4 golden eyes glowed faintly as she scanned the surroundings. Unit 9A, on the other hand, was a small, floating cube, an advanced AI being that hovered silently, its interface lights blinking with intricate patterns. As they prepared to step onto Earth's surface, Kellen's body began to feel an odd sensation, a tingling that spread through his limbs. He wasn't entirely surprised. The atmosphere was denser here than any other world he had visited, but it was also something else. Something more profound. "I must admit," Kellen said, glancing at Jera, "this world feels different. There's a vibrancy in the air." Jera grunted in response, her deep voice vibrating through her armored suit. "We'll see how long that lasts. I've heard this atmosphere has unpredictable effects on outsiders. Let's keep our guard up." Unit 9 floated silently beside them, processing the sensory data from the atmosphere. "Analysis ongoing," it chirped in its mechanical monotone. "Atmosphere contains high levels of nitrogen and oxygen. Elevated levels of energy signatures detected. Unusual but non-threatening." Kellen nodded, satisfied with the preliminary assessment. With a deep breath, he took his first step onto the surface of Earth. Immediately, he was hit with a wave of sensations. The air was thick, rich, almost intoxicating. The colors around him seemed brighter, sharper, more vibrant than anything he had ever seen before. Every sound, from the rustling leaves to the distant hum of machinery, felt amplified. "Are you feeling this?" Kellen asked, his voice thick with awe. Jera nodded curtly, though Kellen could see the tension in her posture. Her species, a Sarnak, were known for their physical resilience, but even she seemed affected by the atmosphere in subtle ways. "It's intense. I can't say I've experienced anything like this before. It's like my senses are on overdrive." Unit 9's lights flickered rapidly as it continued its analysis. Sensory enhancement detected. Earth's atmosphere appears to have stimulatory effects on non-human physiology. Unknown mechanism. Further analysis required. Kellen took a deep breath, savoring the strange sensation. It was as if the very air of Earth was alive, pulsing with energy that filled his mind and body with a sense of euphoria. For a moment, he felt invincible, as though he could accomplish anything. "We should proceed with caution," Jera warned. "This sensation could be dangerous if we're not careful." Kellen nodded, but part of him didn't want to proceed with caution. He wanted to explore, to immerse himself in this new world and all it had to offer. It was rare for him to feel such excitement about a new planet. As an ambassador, he had traveled to countless worlds, met with dozens of species, and yet Earth felt different. It was as if the planet itself was calling to him, beckoning him to discover its secrets. "Let's meet with the humans," Kellen said, his voice filled with renewed energy. "We've come this far. We can't turn back now." As they approached the designated meeting site, Kellen's mind buzzed with possibilities. The humans had been sending out signals into deep space for years, eager for contact with other civilizations. They seemed to be a species driven by curiosity, creativity, and a relentless desire to explore. Despite their relatively primitive technology compared to the rest of the galaxy, they had a spark that intrigued him. The shuttle arrived at the outskirts of a human settlement, a sprawling city with towering structures that glinted in the sunlight. As they descended from the shuttle, a group of humans stood waiting to greet them. At the forefront was Captain Ling, a tall man with sharp features and a calm demeanor. "Welcome to Earth," Captain Ling said, his voice steady despite the evident amazement in his eyes. "It's an honor to meet you." Kellen inclined his head in greeting, careful to maintain diplomatic formality. "The honor is ours, Captain Ling. We come as representatives of the Galactic Alliance, hoping to exchange knowledge and understanding with your people." As they spoke, Kellen couldn't help but notice the subtle shifts in the atmosphere. The euphoria he had felt earlier was beginning to ebb, replaced by a growing sense of clarity. It was as if Earth's atmosphere was adapting to them, molding itself to their presence. He could see it in Jera's posture as well. She seemed more focused, her initial tension easing. Captain Ling gestured toward the city behind him. "We've prepared a secure area for you to stay during your visit. Our scientists and leaders are eager to meet with you and learn about your people." Kellen nodded, but before he could respond, Unit 9's lights began to blink erratically. "Warning," the AI chirped. "Fluctuations in atmospheric composition detected. High concentrations of neurochemical agents present, potentially hazardous." The humans exchanged confused glances, but Kellen's heart raced. The euphoria he had felt earlier, was it not just a reaction to the atmosphere, but something more? Something engineered? "Captain," Kellen said carefully, "does your planet have any known environmental anomalies? Something that might affect the brain's chemistry?" Captain Ling looked puzzled. "No, nothing like that. Our atmosphere is, well, normal, as far as we know." Kellen's mind whirled. Could it be that humans, having evolved in this environment, were immune to the effects of their own atmosphere? It was possible that they had developed natural defenses over millennia, defenses that the Rinder and other species lacked. "Curious," Kellen murmured. "It seems your planet's atmosphere has a profound effect on non-human physiology. It's as if it enhances our senses, heightens our perception, but also carries a risk of overstimulation." Jera stepped forward, her gaze sharp. "This could be dangerous, Ambassador. We need to monitor ourselves carefully." Captain Ling frowned, concern evident in his eyes. "If there's any risk to you, we can help. Our scientists have extensive knowledge of our planet's environment. Perhaps we can work together to understand what's happening." Kellen nodded. "I think that would be wise. We must proceed cautiously, but I believe there is much we can learn from each other." The group moved toward the city, where a human research facility had been prepared for their visit. As they entered the building, Kellen marveled at the ingenuity of the humans. Though their technology was not as advanced as that of the Galactic Alliance, it was clear that they were resourceful and adaptable. The facility was filled with scientists, all eager to learn from their extraterrestrial visitors. One scientist, Dr. Alana Pierce, approached them with a warm smile. "Ambassador Kellen, Commander Jera, Unit 9A, welcome to our research facility. We've been studying Earth's atmosphere for decades, but it's fascinating to hear how it's affecting you." Dr. Pierce led them to a laboratory filled with advanced equipment, some of which Kellen recognized as human adaptations of alien technology. It was clear that humans had been studying signals from space for some time, reverse engineering what they could. "We've always theorized that Earth's atmosphere could have unique properties," Dr. Pierce explained, "but we've never had the chance to study how it affects other species. This is an incredible opportunity for us, and for you, I hope." Kellen's curiosity was piqued. "Your atmosphere is unlike anything we've encountered. It seems to enhance our senses, but were concerned about the long-term effects. Could this be a result of your species' adaptation over time? Dr. Pierce nodded thoughtfully. It's possible. Humans have evolved in this environment for millions of years. Our bodies are naturally attuned to it, but for other species, it could be overwhelming. As they discussed potential experiments to understand the atmosphere's effects, Kellen couldn't shake the feeling that Earth held deeper mysteries. Kellen's thoughts buzzed as he followed Dr. Pierce and the others through the corridors of the research facility. Earth's atmosphere, which had initially felt intoxicating, was beginning to reveal its more complex nature. The further they walked, the more Kellen became aware of a persistent hum in his mind, like a distant vibration resonating through his body. It wasn't unpleasant, but it was unlike anything he had experienced on other worlds. As they entered the main research laboratory, the facility's wide windows provided a breathtaking view of the sprawling human city. Despite its alien architecture, there was something inviting about the place. Perhaps it was the vibrant energy of Earth itself that made Kellen feel as though he was part of something greater. Dr. Pierce led them to a station where holographic projections of Earth's atmosphere floated in the air, detailed data streams flowing beside them. She gestured to the images. Here we have a breakdown of Earth's atmospheric composition. Nitrogen, oxygen, trace gases, all pretty standard on the surface. But what's interesting are the subtle variations in electromagnetic frequencies we've detected. They seem to interact with the brain's neural pathways. Kellen's interest deepened. You're saying that the atmosphere itself might have an effect on cognition? Dr. Pierce nodded. Exactly. We theorized that long-term exposure to Earth's atmosphere could influence neural activity in ways we haven't fully explored. For humans, this is likely a natural part of our evolution. But for visitors like yourselves, she trailed off, her implication clear. Earth's atmosphere wasn't just breathable. It was alive in a way that could actively influence those who were not adapted to it. Commander Jera, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. This could explain why we felt so disoriented when we landed. I've served on many worlds, but I've never felt anything like that before. Unit 9 floated silently beside them, its interface lights blinking in rapid succession. Analysis ongoing, the AI intoned. Preliminary findings suggest that Earth's atmosphere contains neurostimulatory particles not found in other planetary environments. These particles appear to enhance sensory perception and cognitive functions in non-human species. Kellen processed this information with growing fascination. And yet, humans seem unaffected. Could this be why they've adapted so well to such a diverse range of environments on their planet? Dr. Pierce smiled. It's possible. Human resilience is one of our defining traits. We've survived in some of the harshest conditions imaginable, from extreme cold to unbearable heat. But the atmosphere has always been our constant. It might be that we've developed a natural resistance to its more unpredictable effects. Kellen nodded, intrigued by the implications. This opens up fascinating possibilities. If your atmosphere can enhance cognition in non-human species, it could revolutionize how we understand neural evolution across the galaxy. But it's also a potential risk, Jera interjected, her voice laced with caution. If prolonged exposure to Earth's atmosphere leads to cognitive overload, it could be dangerous. We need to proceed carefully. Dr. Pierce's expression turned serious. You're right. That's why we'll need to run a series of tests, both on your physiology and on the atmosphere itself, to better understand the risks. Kellen agreed, though part of him was still caught up in the awe of Earth's mysteries. The planet seemed to hold more than just life. It held the potential to unlock new frontiers of understanding. And yet, as Jera had pointed out, there was a darker side to this discovery. If they weren't careful, the atmosphere could become more of a danger than a blessing. Over the next few hours, the team began a series of experiments. Dr. Pierce and her colleagues set up monitoring devices on Kellen, Jera, and even Unit 9A, tracking their neural activity and vital signs as they continued to breathe Earth's atmosphere. The data streams filled the air, holographic charts showing the fluctuations in their brain activity. Kellen could feel the subtle changes in his perception as the hours passed. Colors became more vivid, sounds more distinct. It was as if his mind was opening up to new levels of awareness. He could sense every detail of the room around him with startling clarity. The faint hum of machinery, the quiet footsteps of the scientists, the distant murmur of the city beyond the facility. Jera, on the other hand, was more guarded. Her 4 golden eyes darted around the room, clearly on edge. "I don't like this," she muttered. "It feels like we're being watched." Kellen glanced at her. Watched? By whom? Jera shook her head. "I don't know. It's just a feeling. Like something is probing my mind." Dr. Pierce, who had been reviewing the data, looked up. That could be a side effect of the neurostimulatory particles. They might be amplifying your sensory perception to the point where you're picking up on things your brain normally filters out. Jera's expression hardened. "Well, I don't like it. We should be cautious. There's no telling what prolonged exposure could do to us." Kellen understood her concern, but he couldn't help feeling a sense of excitement. The atmosphere was like a puzzle, one that offered incredible rewards for those who could solve it. The humans had adapted to it over millennia, but what could it mean for other species? Unit 9A, who had been silent for some time, suddenly emitted a soft chime. New data available. Neural activity in non-human subjects is showing signs of enhancement beyond expected parameters. Potential for cognitive overload increasing. Kellen exchanged a glance with Jera. Cognitive overload. Unit 9 as lights flickered. The brain is being overstimulated by the environment. Prolonged exposure could lead to erratic behavior, hallucinations, or worse. Dr. Pierce's brow furrowed as she studied the data. "We need to pull you out of this environment, at least temporarily. If what Unit 9A is saying is accurate, we could be looking at serious consequences if we don't address this soon." Before Kellen could respond, a wave of dizziness washed over him. His vision blurred, and for a moment, the room around him seemed to warp and shift. Colors bleed into one another, and the air itself seemed to hum with an otherworldly energy. He reached out to steady himself, his hand gripping the edge of a nearby console. "Ambassador." Dr. Pierce rushed to his side, concern flashing in her eyes. "Are you all right?" Kellen shook his head, trying to clear the haze that had descended on his mind. I'm fine. It's just the atmosphere. It's overwhelming." Jera stepped forward, her gaze sharp. "We need to leave. Now." Dr. Pierce nodded. "Agreed. We can move you to an isolated chamber with a controlled atmosphere. It should help mitigate the effects." As they moved to exit the laboratory, Kellen couldn't shake the feeling that Earth was testing them. The planet's atmosphere was both a gift and a curse, a powerful force that could unlock new potentials, but also one that could consume them if they weren't careful. They reached the isolation chamber, where a team of scientists had prepared a controlled environment with filtered air. As soon as Kellen stepped inside, the effects of the atmosphere began to fade. The euphoria dissipated, replaced by a sense of clarity. His mind, which had been buzzing with overstimulation, finally began to calm. Jera and Unit 9 followed suit, both showing signs of relief as the filtered air took effect. Dr. Pierce stood outside the chamber, her expression thoughtful. "It seems that Earth's atmosphere has more profound effects on non-human species than we anticipated. We'll need to study this further, but for now, you should remain in a controlled environment until we can better understand the risks." Kellen nodded, though part of him was reluctant to leave the atmosphere behind. It had shown him glimpses of something extraordinary, something beyond the limits of ordinary perception. But he also knew Jera was right. They needed to be cautious. Earth's atmosphere held incredible potential, but it also posed a danger they couldn't afford to ignore. As they settled into the chamber, Kellen's mind raced with possibilities. What could this mean for the Galactic Alliance? For the future of interspecies relations? Earth was more than just another planet. It was a crucible, a place where new ideas and possibilities could be forged. but it was also a test, one that would require careful navigation if they were to unlock its true potential. Jera, ever the pragmatist, spoke up. "We'll need to report this to the Alliance. They'll want to know about the risks before we proceed with any further missions." Kellen agreed, though he couldn't help but feel a sense of loss. The atmosphere had shown him a world of possibilities, but it had also reminded him of the limits of their understanding. If they were to move forward, they would need to tread carefully. But one thing was certain: Earth had changed him, and it had only just begun to reveal its secrets. Kellen reclined in the control chamber, the soft hum of the machinery surrounding him as the filtered air eased the tension in his mind. He still felt a subtle pull toward the atmosphere beyond the chamber's walls, as if Earth itself was beckoning him back. But for now, he was content to stay within the safety of the enclosed space, his mind returning to a calmer, more rational state. Jera, however, was not as patient. Pacing back and forth within the chamber, her 4 golden eyes flickered with agitation. "This atmosphere," she muttered, "it's a double-edged sword. We need to understand what makes it so dangerous, and why it's so potent." Kellen nodded. "It's clear that the atmosphere has stimulatory effects, but there's more to it than just chemical reactions. I felt something deeper, a connection to the environment, almost like the planet was trying to communicate." Jera stopped pacing and fixed Kellen with a sharp gaze. "Communicate? Are you suggesting the atmosphere itself is sentient?" Kellen shook his head. "Not sentient, but there's something about it that enhances perception. It's like the air is filled with energy, amplifying our senses beyond their normal capacity. Humans must have adapted to it over millennia, but for us, it's overwhelming." Unit 9A, who had been silently monitoring the conversation, emitted a soft chime. "Additional analysis complete. Earth's atmosphere contains trace amounts of particles that interact with neural pathways, potentially enhancing synaptic connections. This could explain the heightened sensory perception and cognitive effects purported by Ambassador Kellen and Commander Jera." Dr. Pierce entered the chamber, carrying a datapad filled with the latest results from their tests. Her expression was a mix of excitement and concern. "We've run some more tests, and the findings are remarkable. Earth's atmosphere contains a previously unidentified element, something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the galaxy as far as we know. We've tentatively named it Elysium, after the mythological paradise from ancient human lore." Kellen sat up, intrigued. "Elysium? And you think this element is responsible for the effects we've been experiencing?" Dr. Pierce nodded. "It appears so. Elysium particles have a unique molecular structure that allows them to bond with certain neural receptors. For humans, the effect is negligible because our brains have evolved to filter them out over time. But for non-human species, it's like an overload, enhancing perception, cognition, even emotional responses. It's both fascinating and dangerous." Jera crossed her arms, her expression skeptical. "And what exactly does that mean for us? Are we at risk if we stay on this planet too long?" Dr. Pierce hesitated for a moment before answering. "It's hard to say. Short-term exposure seems to enhance cognitive functions, but prolonged exposure could lead to neurological strain. In some cases, it could cause hallucinations, erratic behavior, or even permanent neural damage if not carefully monitored." Kellen's mind raced with the implications. Earth's atmosphere wasn't just a biological quirk, it was a resource, a potential game-changer for the Galactic Alliance. If they could harness the properties of Elysium, it could revolutionize everything from medicine to space travel. But it was also a delicate balance, one that required careful understanding to avoid catastrophic consequences. "We need to learn more," Kellen said, his voice steady. "If we can understand how Elysium interacts with the brain, we might be able to control its effects. This could be an incredible opportunity for collaboration between our species." Dr. Pierce smiled. "I was hoping you'd say that. We've already begun developing a series of experiments to explore the potential applications of Elysium. With your help, we could gain a deeper understanding of how it works on non-human physiology." Jera, ever the pragmatist, wasn't as enthusiastic. This all sounds promising, but we can't ignore the risks. We're dealing with an unknown element that's already shown it can be dangerous. We need to proceed with caution. Kellen nodded, understanding her concerns. Agreed. We won't rush into anything without proper safeguards. But we can't afford to ignore this discovery either. The potential is too great. Dr. Pierce led them to a separate section of the facility where a group of human scientists were working on isolating Elysium particles in a controlled environment. The lab was filled with holographic displays, intricate machinery, and samples of Earth's atmosphere stored in pressurized containers. One of the scientists, Dr. Liam Foster, greeted them as they entered. He was a tall man with a sharp mind and an easy smile, his eyes gleaming with excitement. Ambassador Kellen, Commander Jera, welcome. We've been studying Elysium for years, but this is the first time we've had the chance to see how it affects non-human species. The data you've provided is invaluable. Kellen exchanged a glance with Jera before addressing Dr. Foster. What have you learned so far? Dr. Foster gestured to the holographic displays, where molecular models of Elysium floated in the air. Elysium particles are incredibly small, almost quantum level, but they have a unique ability to bond with neural receptors in the brain. For humans, these bonds are weak, and our brains filter them out as background noise. But for non-humans, the bonds are much stronger, leading to enhanced neural activity. In some cases, it even stimulates areas of the brain responsible for memory, creativity, and emotional processing. Kellen studied the models, fascinated by the complexity of the element. And you think we can control this effect? Use it without causing harm? Dr. Foster nodded. That's the goal. If we can develop a way to regulate the interaction between Elysium and the brain, we could harness its benefits without the risks. Imagine what this could mean: enhanced cognitive abilities, improved memory, faster learning. It could revolutionize interspecies collaboration, not to mention the advancements in medical technology. Jera, who had been listening carefully, remained cautious. And what about the risks? You said prolonged exposure could cause neural strain. How do we prevent that? Dr. Foster's smile faded slightly. That's the challenge. We're working on developing countermeasures, ways to safely limit the effects of Elysium on non-human brains. It's still early in the research, but we're making progress. Kellen's mind whirled with possibilities. If they could unlock the full potential of Elysium, it would be a monumental breakthrough for the Galactic Alliance. But he knew they needed to be careful. The line between enhancement and danger was thin, and one wrong step could lead to disaster. As they continued their tour of the facility, Dr. Pierce pulled Kellen aside. "There's something else I wanted to show you," she said, her voice hushed. "It's a theory we've been working on, something that could explain why Earth's atmosphere is so different from any other planet we've encountered." Kellen followed her to a secluded section of the lab, where a massive holographic projection of Earth hovered in the air. Dr. Pierce tapped a control panel, and the image zoomed in on the planet's atmosphere, highlighting intricate patterns of energy flowing through the air. "We've been studying the planet's electromagnetic field," Dr. Pierce explained. "It's unlike anything we've seen on other worlds. Earth's field is constantly shifting, interacting with the atmosphere in ways we don't fully understand. But here's the interesting part. These shifts seem to correspond with the presence of Elysium particles." Kellen's brow furrowed. "You think the planet's electromagnetic field is generating Elysium?" Dr. Pierce nodded. "It's possible. We found traces of Elysium particles in areas where the field is strongest, particularly near the poles. It's almost as if the planet is producing it, like a natural byproduct of its environment." The implications were staggering. If Earth was the only planet in the galaxy capable of generating Elysium, it would make the planet even more valuable to the Galactic Alliance. But it also meant they were dealing with forces far beyond their current understanding. Jera joined them, her eyes narrowing as she studied the projection. If this is true, then Earth is sitting on a resource more valuable than any other in the galaxy. But it also means we need to be careful. Whoever controls Elysium controls a power that could change everything. Kellen agreed, but his thoughts were already turning to the possibilities. Humans, with their natural resistance to Elysium, could be the key to unlocking its full potential, but it would require careful negotiation, collaboration, and trust, things that weren't always easy to come by in interspecies relations. As the day came to an end, Kellen found himself standing by the window, looking out over the city. The atmosphere, which had once felt so overwhelming, now seemed calm, almost serene, but he knew better than to let his guard down. Earth was a world of contradictions, beautiful and dangerous, full of promise and peril. And it was only just beginning to reveal its secrets. The soft glow of the research facility's lights dimmed as night fell over the city. Kellen watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the alien architecture. Earth's vibrant energy, which had once seemed so alluring, now felt more ominous as the weight of the discovery sank in. Elysium was not just a scientific curiosity, it was a force that could change the very fabric of galactic relations. Kellen turned from the window, his mind still racing with thoughts of the day's revelations. Behind him, Commander Jera sat stiffly in a chair, her 4 golden eyes scanning the room with their usual sharpness. But Kellen could see the subtle signs of tension in her posture. Earth was affecting her, just as it had affected him. "Do you feel it?" Jera asked, her voice low but edged with concern. Kellen nodded. "The atmosphere, it's different at night. More intense." Jera grunted in agreement. "We need to be careful, Kellen. This element, Elysium, it's not just dangerous in a scientific sense. There's something more to it, something we're not seeing yet. I don't like being this close to it for too long." Kellen understood her caution. The earlier euphoria they had experienced upon first arriving had begun to wane, replaced by a creeping sense of unease. The filtered air in the chamber was supposed to protect them from the atmosphere's effects, but even now, Kellen could feel the subtle pull of Elysium in the air, like an invisible hand reaching for his mind. As if reading his thoughts, Unit 9's soft, mechanical voice broke the silence. "Atmospheric fluctuations detected. Elysium particle concentration is increasing outside the facility. Unknown source." Kellen turned to the floating cube, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean, increasing? I thought the atmosphere was stable." Unit 9's lights flickered as it processed the data. Earth's atmosphere is not static. Electromagnetic shifts in the planet's poles are creating temporary surges in Elysium particle concentration. Current levels are 15% higher than recorded this morning. Jera's eyes narrowed. "That's too much. We're already experiencing the effects at normal levels. If it keeps rising." Kellen cut her off, his mind racing. "We need to alert Dr. Pierce. She and her team need to know about this." Just as he was about to contact her, the door to their chamber slid open, and Dr. Pierce entered, her face pale and her movements hurried. She carried a datapad, its screen flashing with red alerts. "We have a problem," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "There's been an incident at one of our research outposts near the northern magnetic pole. The team we sent to study Elysium's concentration near the poles has gone radio silent. We haven't heard from them in hours." Kellen's pulse quickened. "You think it's related to the electromagnetic surges?" Dr. Pierce nodded grimly. "It has to be. The poles are where Elysium is most concentrated, and if the atmosphere is fluctuating, the effects could be unpredictable. We've never seen concentrations this high before." Jera stood up, her expression unreadable. "We need to send a rescue team. Those scientists could be in serious danger." Dr. Pierce hesitated. "I agree, but sending another team into the same conditions could be just as risky. We don't know how the atmosphere is going to react, and if Elysium has already caused neurological damage, it might be too late to help them." Kellen thought quickly, weighing the options. If the research outpost had been affected by an atmospheric surge, the scientists might already be suffering from the cognitive overload that Unit 9A had warned them about, but they couldn't just leave them behind. "I'll go," Kellen said firmly. "I'm already experiencing the effects, but I can still think clearly." We need to figure out what's happening before it spreads to other areas. Jera shot him a sharp look. You're not going alone. I'm coming with you. Dr. Pierce looked between them, concern etched on her face. You're both vulnerable to the atmosphere's effects. If the Elysium concentration is even higher near the pole, it could overwhelm you before you can get to the outpost. Kellen turned to Unit 9A, whose interface lights flickered in rapid succession. Unit 9A, can you accompany us? You're not affected by the atmosphere the same way we are. Unit 9A emitted a soft hum. Affirmative. I will monitor environmental conditions and provide real-time data during the mission. Jera nodded, her expression resolute. Then it's settled. We leave immediately. Dr. Pierce handed Kellen a small device, a portable filtration unit designed to regulate their exposure to Elysium. This should help mitigate the effects. It won't block them entirely, but it will buy you time. Kellen took the device and clipped it to his suit. He knew the risks, but there was no other option. The outpost was their only lead, and they had to act fast before the situation spiraled out of control. As they suited up and prepared to leave the facility, Kellen couldn't shake the feeling that they were venturing into uncharted territory, both literally and figuratively. Elysium was more than just a scientific mystery. It was a force of nature, one that could not be fully understood or controlled. The journey to the northern pole was swift but tense. They traveled in a small atmospheric shuttle designed for short-range missions, the hum of the engines providing a constant background noise as they soared over Earth's surface. Below them, the landscape shifted from the dense urban sprawl of the city to the barren, icy wilderness of the polar regions. As they approached the outpost, Unit 9's voice crackled through the shuttle's comm system. Atmospheric Elysium levels rising. Current concentration is 30% above baseline. Jera, seated beside Kellen, clenched her jaw. We're flying into a storm. Kellen glanced at the readings on his console. The fluctuations were growing more severe, the atmosphere swirling with invisible energy that seemed to pulse in rhythm with the planet's electromagnetic field. Whatever was happening at the poles, it was intensifying. The outpost came into view, a small isolated structure nestled among the ice and snow, its exterior coated in a thin layer of frost. As they descended toward the landing pad, Kellen could see that the facility's lights were flickering erratically, casting eerie shadows across the frozen landscape. Looks like the power's failing, Jera muttered as the shuttle touched down. Let's hope the team inside is still alive. They disembarked, the cold air biting at their skin as they stepped out onto the ice. The portable filtration devices hummed softly, filtering the air as they moved toward the entrance of the outpost. Unit 9 hovered beside them, its lights scanning the area. Environmental conditions stable, the AI reported, but Elysium levels are dangerously high. Proceed with caution. The door to the outpost slid open with a hiss, revealing a dimly lit interior. The air inside was heavy, almost oppressive, as if the atmosphere itself was pressing down on them. Kellen could feel the subtle effects of the Elysium particles already creeping into his mind, a heightened awareness, a sharpening of his senses, but also a growing disorientation. Stay focused, Jera warned, her voice steady but tense. We don't know what we're walking into. They moved deeper into the facility, the silence broken only by the faint hum of malfunctioning machinery. The outpost was small, with only a few rooms and corridors, but it felt larger in the oppressive atmosphere, the walls seeming to close in around them. Kellen's heart raced as they reached the central control room. The door was ajar, and inside, the flickering light revealed a scene of chaos. Equipment was scattered across the floor, monitors were shattered, and the research team, 4 humans, were slumped over their consoles, motionless. Jera rushed forward, checking for signs of life. They're still breathing, she said, her voice tight with relief. But they're unresponsive. Whatever happened, it hit them hard. Kellen moved to one of the consoles, trying to access the facility's data logs. The screen flickered, displaying fragmented reports of atmospheric surges and rising Elysium levels. It was clear that the outpost had been overwhelmed, but there was something else, an entry that caught his eye, marked with a red alert. "Jera," he said, his voice low. "You need to see this." Jera joined him at the console, her eyes narrowing as she read the report. "Anomalous energy signatures detected near the northern pole," she muttered. "Increased Elysium concentrations. Unstable electromagnetic activity. What the hell is happening up here?" Kellen felt a chill run down his spine. The electromagnetic surges, the rising Elysium levels, it wasn't a coincidence. Something was happening beneath the surface, something that was destabilizing the atmosphere itself. Before he could respond, Unit 9's lights flared brightly. "Warning. Massive electromagnetic surge detected. Elysium levels spiking. Immediate evacuation recommended." The air around them, the flickering lights of the outpost cast long shadows across the room as Kellen's heart pounded in his chest. The sudden surge of Elysium particles was palpable, like an invisible wave pressing down on them, tightening the air and straining his thoughts. It wasn't just a strange element anymore. It felt like a living force, unpredictable and volatile. "Immediate evacuation recommended," Unit 9 repeated in its flat mechanical tone, floating beside Kellen with its lights flashing in alarm. Jera stood rigid beside him, her hand gripping the edge of a console as the oppressive atmosphere bore down on her. "We can't just leave these people behind. They're alive, but they're not going to survive much longer if we don't get them out of here." Kellen forced himself to focus through the haze, glancing at the unconscious scientists slumped over their equipment. Their faces were slack, their breathing shallow, but there was still time to save them. If the surge of Elysium overwhelmed them completely, though, they might never wake up. "We'll need to stabilize them before we can move them," Dr. Pierce's voice crackled over the comms. "I can guide you through the process, but it's going to be risky. The surge might interfere with the equipment, and you'll have to work quickly." Kellen swallowed hard, wiping sweat from his brow. The disorientation from the Elysium particles was growing stronger, but they had no choice. They had to try. "Give us the instructions, Dr. Pierce," he said, his voice firm despite the growing dizziness. Dr. Pierce began rattling off instructions, detailing how to use the portable filtration devices they had brought to create a temporary atmospheric buffer around the unconscious scientists. The process involved placing the devices near the affected individuals and calibrating them to emit a frequency that would disrupt the bond between the Elysium particles and the neural receptors in their brains. Kellen and Jera moved quickly, placing the devices around the room and activating them one by one. The devices emitted a soft hum as they powered up, creating a faint, shimmering barrier around the scientists. Almost immediately, Kellen could see a change. Their breathing grew steadier, and the tension in their bodies began to ease. "It's working," Kellen muttered, relief flooding through him, but the sense of victory was short-lived. Unit 9's lights blinked rapidly, and the A's voice crackled with urgency. "Warning. Electromagnetic activity increasing. Elysium levels now at critical threshold." Kellen glanced at Jera, his stomach tightening. They had bought themselves some time, but the situation was getting worse by the second. The surge in Elysium particles was accelerating, and if they didn't get out of the outpost soon, they might not survive the exposure. "How much time do we have?" Jera asked, her voice tense but controlled. "Minutes at best," Unit 9 responded. Kellen's mind raced. They could stabilize the scientists, but getting them back to the shuttle would take time they didn't have. The portable filtration devices would protect the scientists from further exposure, but it wasn't enough to completely reverse the effects of Elysium. They needed a more powerful solution. "Dr. Pierce," Kellen said, his voice urgent, "we've stabilized the team, but we can't move them without risking their lives. Is there any way to reverse the effects of the Elysium surge?" There was a long pause on the other end of the comms, and for a moment, Kellen feared the worst. Then, Dr. Pierce's voice returned, filled with determination. "There is one option," she said slowly. "We've been developing an experimental countermeasure, a concentrated neutralizing agent designed to disrupt the Elysium particles at the molecular level. It's still in the testing phase, but if we don't use it now, the scientists won't survive." Kellen's heart raced. An untested countermeasure. It was risky, but so was staying here any longer. "We'll do it," he said firmly. "Send the formula and instructions. We'll make it work." Jera shot him a wary look, but she didn't argue. They both knew the gravity of the situation, and there was no time for hesitation. Dr. Pierce transmitted the data, and Unit 9 began synthesizing the neutralizing agent using the portable medical equipment they had brought with them. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as they worked, calibrating the equipment and preparing the agent while the oppressive atmosphere pressed down on them. Kellen's head throbbed with the strain of focusing through the haze. The Elysium particles were affecting him more strongly now, tugging at the edges of his consciousness, making it difficult to think clearly. He could feel the planet's pull, its energy flooding his mind like a drug. But he forced himself to stay grounded, knowing that the lives of the scientists, and possibly his own, depended on it. Finally, Unit 9A completed the process, dispensing the neutralizing agent into a small vial. "The agent is ready," the AI intoned. "Administer it to the affected individuals immediately." Kellen and Jera wasted no time, carefully injecting the agent into the unconscious scientists. The response was almost immediate. Their breathing steadied even further, and the faint tremors that had racked their bodies stilled. The neutralizing agent was working. "They're stabilizing," Jera said, relief evident in her voice. But before they could breathe easy, Unit 9's alarm flared again. Electromagnetic surge imminent. Elysium levels at maximum. A deep rumble shook the facility, and the air itself seemed to vibrate with an otherworldly energy. Kellen's vision blurred, and a wave of nausea swept over him as the surge hit. The walls of the outpost groaned under the pressure, and the lights flickered wildly, casting a room in chaotic shadows. "We need to get out of here," Jera shouted, her voice barely audible over the growing hum of the surge. Kellen staggered toward the exit, his legs feeling like lead as the atmosphere grew heavier with each passing second. Jera was beside him, dragging one of the unconscious scientists over her shoulder, while Unit 9 hovered nearby, monitoring the situation with its cold efficiency. The world outside the outpost was a swirling mass of energy. The sky above the northern pole crackled with electromagnetic storms, and the air shimmered with invisible waves of Elysium. Kellen could feel it pressing down on him, pulling at his mind, trying to draw him deeper into its grasp. "Move, Kellen," Jera barked, her voice cutting through the haze. Kellen blinked, forcing himself to focus. He grabbed the remaining scientists, his muscles straining as he hauled them toward the shuttle. The wind howled around them as the electromagnetic storm intensified, sending waves of static electricity through the air. With one final push, they reached the shuttle. Jera practically threw the scientist into the shuttle's medical bay, and Kellen followed suit, securing the others before collapsing into the pilot's seat. His vision swam, the effects of the Elysium surge making it difficult to think, but he fought through the fog, activating the shuttle's engines. "Unit 9A, get us out of here," Kellen ordered, his voice barely above a whisper. The AI complied, and the shuttle lifted off the ground, rising through the storm-torn air. Kellen could feel the surge reaching its peak as they ascended, the Elysium particles pressing against the shuttle's hull like a tidal wave. But as they broke through the atmosphere, the pressure began to ease. The shuttle's interior lights flickered as the electromagnetic interference subsided, and the oppressive weight of the atmosphere lifted. Kellen slumped back in his seat, his chest heaving as he took in deep, steadying breaths. "We made it," Jera muttered from the seat beside him, her voice hoarse but steady. Kellen nodded, still too exhausted to speak. They had escaped the surge, and the scientists were stable, but the ordeal had left him shaken. Elysium wasn't just a powerful element, it was a force that could bend reality itself, a force they had barely begun to understand. As the shuttle sped away from the northern pole, Kellen's thoughts turned to the future. They had discovered something extraordinary, something that could change everything for the Galactic Alliance. But they had also uncovered something dangerous, something that could easily spiral out of control if not handled with care. The road ahead would be difficult, and the decisions they made in the coming days would shape the fate of their mission, and possibly the galaxy itself. But for now, they had survived. The shuttle glided smoothly through Earth's atmosphere, leaving the chaotic polar storms far behind. Kellen leaned back in his seat, his body heavy with exhaustion, but his mind racing with the implications of what they had just experienced. Jera sat silently beside him, her expression a mask of grim determination. The unconscious scientists lay strapped to their seats in the back of the shuttle, their breathing stable, but their future uncertain. Earth's atmosphere, rich with the mysterious element Elysium, had proven to be far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. What had begun as a diplomatic mission had turned into a life-or-death struggle against the very air they breathed. And yet, as the tension in Kellen's chest eased, he couldn't help but marvel at the possibilities. Elysium was a discovery that could change everything. As they approached the human city where the research facility was located, the shuttle's comms crackled to life. Ambassador Kellen, Commander Jera, Dr. Pierce's voice came through, heavy with relief. "We've been monitoring your descent. I'm glad to see you made it out." "We're safe for now," Kellen replied, his voice tired. "The scientists are stable, but we barely made it. The Elysium surge at the pole was unlike anything we've seen." Dr. Pierce was silent for a moment before responding. "We've been analyzing the data from the surge. It confirms what we suspected. Earth's electromagnetic field is directly linked to the production of Elysium, and those surges are becoming more frequent. If we don't find a way to stabilize the situation, it could become catastrophic." Jera, who had been quietly monitoring the conversation, spoke up. "What are our options, Doctor? We can't let this element spiral out of control. It's too dangerous." Dr. Pierce sighed. "We're still in the early stages of understanding how Elysium works, but there's a potential solution. We've developed a containment protocol that could limit the production of Elysium in the atmosphere, essentially stabilizing the electromagnetic fluctuations and preventing future surges. But it would require global coordination. Humans would have to implement the protocol across the entire planet." Kellen frowned. "You think they're ready for that? This isn't just about stabilizing their planet. It's about controlling a force they've never even known existed until now." Dr. Pierce hesitated. "It's true. Most humans are unaware of Elysium's existence. But if we don't act soon, the surges will continue to grow stronger, and eventually they could destabilize not just Earth, but the entire region of space around it." The weight of her words settled heavily on Kellen's shoulders. He knew that Elysium's potential was extraordinary. It could revolutionize medicine, technology, even interstellar travel. But it was also a ticking time bomb, one that could destroy them all if they weren't careful. "We'll discuss it once we land," Kellen said finally. "We need to speak with the human leadership. They deserve to know what's happening on their own planet." The shuttle touched down at the research facility, and Kellen, Jera, and Unit 9 had disembarked with the unconscious scientists in tow. Medics rushed forward to take the scientists to the medical wing, where they would receive further treatment. Dr. Pierce met them at the entrance, her face pale but resolute. "You've been through a lot," she said softly, her eyes scanning the group. "Thank you for bringing them back." Kellen nodded, but his mind was already on the next steps. "We need to meet with Captain Ling and the other human leaders. This is bigger than just a research mission now." Dr. Pierce led them through the facility, the air heavy with the tension of the situation. As they entered the main briefing room, Captain Ling and several human officials were waiting for them, their faces grim. Kellen could tell that they had been briefed on the basics of the situation, but they were still processing the enormity of what was happening. Ambassador, Captain Ling said, stepping forward. We've been told about the Elysium surges. Is it true? Could our planet be in danger? Kellen took a deep breath, choosing his words carefully. Yes, Captain. Earth's atmosphere contains a unique element called Elysium. It's an incredibly powerful substance that affects neural activity and can enhance cognitive functions. But it's also unstable, and the electromagnetic fluctuations near your planet's poles are causing dangerous surges in its concentration. He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. If we don't find a way to control these surges, they could destabilize your planet's atmosphere, potentially causing irreversible damage, not just to Earth, but to the surrounding space. The room fell silent as the human leaders processed the information. Captain Ling's face was tight with concern. And how do we control it? What do we need to do? Kellen glanced at Dr. Pierce, who stepped forward. We've developed a containment protocol that could limit the production of Elysium in the atmosphere, but it would require global coordination. Your planet's governments would need to work together to implement the protocol across the entire planet. One of the human officials, a middle-aged woman with sharp features, frowned. Global coordination. You're asking us to get every country on Earth to agree to this? That's a monumental task. Jera, who had been silent up until now, spoke in her usual blunt manner. It's either that or face the consequences of doing nothing. We've seen the effects of Elysium firsthand. It's not just some environmental issue, it's a matter of survival. Captain Ling nodded slowly, his expression hardening. You're right. This is bigger than politics or borders. We need to work together. Kellen felt a surge of relief at the captain's words, but the road ahead would still be difficult. Convincing the entire planet to cooperate on such a massive scale was no small feat, and time was running out. There's one more thing you should know, Kellen said, his voice low. Elysium is not just a threat, it's an opportunity. If we can stabilize it, this element could revolutionize your world. It could enhance your technology, your medicine, even your understanding of the universe. But it's a double-edged sword. If handled poorly, it could destroy everything. Captain Ling and the other officials exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of hope and fear. We'll do what needs to be done, Captain Ling said finally. But we'll need your help. This isn't something we can handle on our own. Kevin nodded. We'll help in any way we can. But this is your planet, your atmosphere. Ultimately, it's up to humanity to decide how to handle it. As the meeting continued, plans were drawn up to begin the containment protocol. Scientists from around the world would be briefed on Elysium and its effects, and the Galactic Alliance would provide the necessary technology to help implement the stabilization efforts. It would take time, and there would be challenges along the way. But for the first time, Kellen felt a sense of cautious optimism. After the meeting, as the human leaders dispersed to begin their work, Kellen stood by the window of the briefing room, staring out at the city below. The lights of the skyscrapers twinkled in the distance, a reminder of the vast potential of the human race. Earth was a world of contradictions, beautiful and dangerous, full of wonder and peril. But it was also a world of hope. Jera joined him at the window, her arms crossed over her chest. Do you think they'll pull it off? Kellen smiled faintly. I think they'll surprise us, like they always do. Humans have a way of rising to the occasion when it matters most. Jera nodded, her gaze distant. We've discovered something extraordinary here, Kellen, but we've also seen how fragile it all is. Elysium could change everything, for better or worse. Kellen looked out at the stars beyond the horizon, feeling the weight of the future pressing down on him. It's always been that way, hasn't it? Every discovery, every breakthrough, it's a balance between creation and destruction. We just have to hope that we're wise enough to choose the right path. Jera grunted in agreement. Let's hope so. As they stood together in silence, Kellen felt a strange sense of peace. They had come to Earth to offer humanity a place in the Galactic Alliance, and though their mission had taken unexpected turns, it was clear that the humans were ready for the challenge. They had faced the dangers of Elysium and survived, and now they stood on the brink of something new. In the end, it wasn't just about Elysium or Earth's atmosphere. It was about humanity's potential, their resilience, their ingenuity, and their unyielding drive to push the boundaries of what was possible. And that, Kellen realized, was what made them truly unique in the galaxy. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Kellen turned to Jera and smiled. "We've seen the worst, and we've seen the best. Now, let's see what they do with it."